Hey, welcome to Books by Ivan. I'm Ivan and I cover books. And today I'll be covering Letters to Milena by Franz Kafka. I'll be covering letter 30 to 35. With that being said, get yourself comfortable, grab a cup of coffee, and let's get into today's letter. June 20th, 1920, Sunday. After a short walk with you, how easy is it to write that? A short walk with you. I should stop writing out of shame because it is so easy. First of all, what most terrifies me about the story is the conviction that the Jews are necessarily bound to fall upon you Christians. You as predatory animals are bound to murder, although the Jews would be horrified since you're not animals but rather all too aware. It is impossible for you to imagine this in its all fullness and power, even if you understand everything else in the story better than I do. I don't understand how whole nations of people could ever have thought of ritual murder before these recent events. At most, they may have felt general fear or jealousy, but there is no question we see Hilsner committing the crime step by step. What difference does it make that a virgin embraces him at the same time? But on the other hand, I also don't understand how nations could believe that a Jew might murder without stabbing himself in the process, for this is what he does, but of course the nation don't need to worry about that. Once again, I am exaggerating. These are all exaggerations. They are exaggerations because people seeking salvation always throw themselves at women, and these women can be either Christians or Jewish. And what is meant by the girls, in a sense, is not the usual chastity, but the innocence of sacrifice. An innocence which has just as much to do with the body. There are some things I could say about the report, but I'd rather maintain my silence. In the first place, I know Has, that's the name of someone, I know Has only slightly, although oddly, his congratulations on my engagement were the warmest I received. I don't know the others at all. However, you might be mad at me if I were to get mixed up with this affair with my speculations, since it's really your own business, and beside, no one can help here anymore anyways. It would just be a guessing game. I'm still afraid you might condemn me unjustly concerning the girl I was supposed to meet in Carlsbad and to whom I told the truth as well as I could following my telegram and 2 vague notes. In her mind, I'm still going out of my way not to praise her in any way. My fear is all the greater since I shall of course be condemned, and very severely. But by no means according to the essence of what you wrote. In that case, even more severely. You may say fine. I'd rather bear the more severe condemnations I deserve than the lighter one, which doesn't pertain. Excuse my unclear speech. It's something I have to come to terms with on my own. While doing so, I will only be allowed to see you from afar. Kafka. As far as Max is concerned, I also think that, for the time being, One will have to know him personally in order to judge him in his entirety. But then one has to love him, admire him, be proud of him, and of course sympathize with him as well. Whoever does not act that way towards him, assuming goodwill, does not know him. Franz Kafka. And that was the end of today's first letter. And like he says, excuse me for my English speech, because as I was reading it, I didn't know like what I was reading precisely. Alright? I mean, he's getting married again. Oh, by the way, in case you didn't realize, when they said, what was it? Hisner, they meant, the painter. I think that's like a safe way to say who we're talking about. But yeah, he's getting remarried already. Wow. Oh well, what can you do? There's nothing we can do, as Napoleon once said. That being said and done, let's get into the second letter of the day. June 21st, 1920, Monday. You're right. Just now when I read your reproach concerning Child's Child, unfortunately I didn't receive the letters until late in the evening and early tomorrow. I'm planning to go on a short trip to Bolzano with the engineer. I really did say to myself, enough, you can't read his letters today. You have to get at least some sleep if you want to go on a trip tomorrow. And it took some time before I went back to reading and understood, and the tension passed. And I could have laid my head in your lap with a sigh of relief if you were here. And I don't mean just in body. This is surely a sign of sickness, isn't it? It is. He's actually very mentally unstable. I'm just saying, because come on. But I do know you after all, and also know that child isn't such a terrible way to address somebody. I too can take a joke, but anything can also become a threat to me. If you were to write me, yesterday I counted the ends in your letters. There were such and such many. How dare you write the end to me, and especially such and such many times? And if you kept a serious face, I might even become convinced that I had insulted you and would be sufficiently unhappy. And in the end, perhaps, it really does annoy you. It's difficult to find out. Nor should you forget that although it's easy to distinguish between what is said in jest and what is earnest when it comes to people who mean so much to us that our lives depends on them, then it isn't so easy after all. The risk is so great, it turns our eyes into a microscope, and once equipped with those, it's impossible to distinguish anything. In this respect, I was never strong, even when I was at my strongest. For example, in first grade, our cook, a small, dry, thin person with a pointed nose, hollow cheek, someone jaundiced but firm, energetic and superior, took me to school every morning. We were living in the house which separated the Kleiner Ring from the Grosser Ring. So you first had to cross the ring, then turn onto the Teingasse, then proceed through a kind of vaulted gate under flanged marquise. I'm gonna put this in the video. And down to the flame marked, and every morning for about a year, the same thing happened. On our way out of the house, the cook would say she was going to tell the teacher how naughty I had been at home. In fact, I probably wasn't at all that badly behaved, but I was stubborn, good for nothing, sad, ill-tempered, and probably sufficiently so that she could always concoct something nice for the teacher. I knew that, and so didn't take the cook's threat too lightly, but mainly I thought the way to school was terribly long and that many things could still happen along the way. Anxiety and that I seriously developed precisely out of such apparently childish nonsense, but gradually, since no way ever is so terrifyingly long. I'm sorry. Moreover, at least while on the all started the ring, I still doubted whether the cook would even dare speak to the teacher, who commanded the respect of the world. For although the cook commanded respect, she did so only at home, but whenever I would say something to that effect, the cook would usually answer curtly with her thin, pitiless lip that I didn't have to believe it. But she would tell anyways. Somewhere near the entry to the flea marks gaze, I'm gonna put this down, which still has a slight historical significance for me. In which neighborhood did you live in? Did you live as a child? The fear of the threat prevailed. Schooling itself was a nightmare, and now the cook wanted to make it even worse. I would start to beg. She would shake her head. The more I pleaded, the greater the danger. I would stop and ask her for forgiveness. She would drag me along. I would threaten her with retaliation from my parents. She would laugh. Here she was, almighty. I would cling to the door of the shop, to the cornerstone. I didn't want to go any further until she had forgiven me. I would pull her back by her dress. She didn't have an easy time either, but she would drag me on, assuring me that this, too, would be reported to the teacher. It was getting late. The Jacob's skirt was striking 8. You could hear the school bells. The other children would start to run. I always had the greatest terror of being late. Now we had to run as well, and all time the thought, she'll tell, she won't tell. It turns out she never told, not once, but there was always the possibility she might, an ever-growing possibility. I didn't tell yesterday, but you can be sure I'll tell today. Which she never gave up, and sometimes, imagine, Milena, she would be so angry, she would even stamp her feet on the street, and sometimes there was a woman selling coals nearby watching. Milena, what nonsense! And how much I belong to you. And how much I belong to you with all these cucks and threats and this terribleness which has been stirred up by 38 years is now settling in my lungs. But that's not at all what I wanted to tell you, or at least I wanted to say it differently. It's late. I have to stop so I can go to sleep. And I won't be able to sleep because I would have stopped writing to you. Sometimes, if you'd like to know what my earlier years were like, I'll send you from Prague the gigantic letter I wrote to my father about half a year ago, but which I have not yet given him, and I'll answer your letters tomorrow. Or, if it should get too late, then not until the day after. Since I've decided not to visit my parents in Friends in Bad, I'm staying a few days longer, although simply lying around on the balcony doesn't really deserve to be called a decision. And once again, thank you for your letter, Franz Kafka. That was the end of the second letter of the day. And the cook in question, the cook, right, is like that one friend at school where you do something stupid, right, and you're like messing around, and they ended up raising their hands, right, and getting the teacher's attention, and you start begging them, you start pleading with them not to tell on you, right, but they never do it. Instead, they ask to go to like the bathroom or something. That's exactly this. That's the same picture I have in mind when I think about a cook, right, in the story. Like, he's like that friend. And now I can't see it. She never told, which was great. And I kind of feel bad for the cook because Franz was, as a child, he seems like a handful. With that being said, let's get into the third letter of the day, which is relatively long, but we'll manage. June 23rd, 1920, Wednesday. It's difficult to tell the truth, since there's only one truth. But what that truth is alive, and therefore has a lively, changing face. Never really beautiful, not by any means, perhaps pretty on occasion. If I had answered you Monday night, it would have been terrible. I was lying in bed, as if on the rack. The whole night I kept formulating my reply to you, complaining to you, trying to scare you away from me, cursing myself. Also, because I had received a letter late in the evening and was too sensitive and upset by the nearness of the night for serious words. Then I left early for Bolzano, taking the electric train to Kolbenstein, 1,200 meter high, right across the first chain of the Dolomites. I breathed the pure, almost cold air. To be sure, not entirely in my right mind. Later, on my way back, I wrote you the following, which I now copy, although even this strikes me as far too harsh, at least today, so the days change. At least I am by myself. The engineer stayed in Bolzano. I am on my way back. The fact that the engineer and the landscape came between us didn't cause me too much suffering, since I wasn't entirely there myself. I spent last evening until 12:30 with you, with writing, and even more with thinking. Then I stayed in bed until 6, hardly sleeping a wink. Afterward, I jumped up, like a stranger pulling another stranger out of bed, and that was a good thing, since otherwise I would have written and dozed the day away in Moran without any consolation. It doesn't matter that this excursion has barely even crawled into my consciousness, and that it will remain in my memory only as a very vague dream. The night passed the way it did because with your letters, you have a very penetrating gaze, which wouldn't mean much in itself after all. People run around in the street all but asking for such a gaze. But you have the courage that match your gaze, and above all, the power to see beyond it. This ability to see beyond is the main thing, and you have exactly that. You have once again awakened out of the old devils who sleep with one eye closed and one open, waiting for an opportunity. course, this is frightening and makes me break out of cold sweat. I swear to you, only because of them, the impalpable forces. Nevertheless, it's a good thing. It's a healthy. One watches the antic of these forces and knows that they are there. Still, your interpretation of my "you should leave Vienna" isn't entirely correct. I did not write this carelessly, but under the impression of the whole report, that contest hadn't even occurred to me beforehand. At the time, I was beside myself that your immediate departure from Vienna seemed the most natural thing. This was because I considered, really, very selfishly, that whatever even grazes your husband strikes me square on 10 times and 100 times harder. Cutting me into pieces, it's no different than with you. Nor did I fear the material burden. I don't earn much, but it will easily be enough for the both. Wow, he's going all out. He's going all out. Okay. I don't earn much, but it will easily be enough for both of us. I think, bearing any illness, of course, and moreover, I am sincere as long as I have the power to think and express myself. I was before too, but you're really the first one to make that helpful observation. The only thing I do fear, and I fear this with my eyes wide open, I am drowning in this fear, helpless. If I could sleep as deeply as I sink into fear, I would no longer be alive. Is this inner conspiracy against myself, which the letter to my father will help you understand better? Although not entirely, since the letter is much too focused on the purpose, which is based on the fact that I, who am not even the pawn of a pawn in the great chess game, far from it, now want to take the place of the queen against all the rules and to the confusion of the game. I, the pawn of a pawn, a piece which doesn't even exist, which isn't even in the game, and next I may want to take the king's place as well, or even the whole board. If that Moreover, if that were what I really wanted, it will have to happen in some other, even more inhumane way. That's why the suggestion I made to you means much more to me than it does to you. At the moment, it's the only thing beyond doubt, the only thing not sickled over, the only thing which makes me unconditionally happy. He's a pawn of a pawn in a big chess game. I like that metaphor. I really enjoy the metaphor that he puts in this letter. Wow, absolutely beautiful. Let's keep going. The only thing which makes me unconditionally happy. That's the way it was yesterday. Today, for example, I'd say I will certainly come to Vienna, but since today is today and tomorrow is tomorrow, I'm going to leave myself some freedom. In any case, I will not surprise you, nor will I come any later than Thursday. If I am coming, I'll send you a letter by pneumatic mail. I wouldn't be able to see you and to see anyone but you. I know that much, and certainly not before Tuesday. I would arrive at a Serpenhof. I'll put that down. I still don't know where I would depart, so I would stay somewhere near Serpenhof. It's a shame. I don't know where you give your Serpenhof lessons, but I could wait for you there at 5. I'm sorry if I'm reading like a robot. Sudbenhof really like threw me off. Today, I looked at the map of Vienna for a moment. It seems incomprehensible to me that they would build such a huge city when you only need one room. I may have also addressed post-restant letter to Polak. Franz Kafka. That was the end of the third letter, which, as I mentioned earlier, kinda hefty. And the metaphor he made when he said that he is a pawn of a pawn in a chess game, and he has no ambition to become the queen, right? This is not ambition, it was something like he didn't have the power. Yeah, that was fascinating. That was truly a beautiful metaphor. From the way I view it, right, it's more of he doesn't have the ability to go for something, right? That it's so immense, right? And it's not in the right way, because later it says that it will not be it would be in an inhumane way, meaning he will have to do something inhumane to achieve that position. And well, let's just hope he doesn't. But anyways, that was a beautiful metaphor. I loved it. Let's get into the fourth letter of the day. June 24th, 1920, Thursday. One is a lot brighter and rested than after a good night's sleep. Yesterday I had slept a little better and immediately wrote certain stupidities concerning the trip to Vienna. After all, this trip isn't something travel, isn't anything to joke about. I won't surprise you under any circumstances. I tremble at the very idea. I won't even enter your apartment. If you haven't received the pneumatic letter by Thursday, then I have gone to Prague. By the way, I am told I will arrive at Westbahnhof yesterday. I believe I wrote... Yes, you did. I believe I wrote Sudbenhof. But this is immaterial, although I am impractical, negligent, and difficult to transport. I am not excessively so, provided I've slept some. You don't have to worry about that. If I board the car bound to Vienna, then I will most likely get off in Vienna. Just getting on is a little difficult. So auf Wiedersehen. Auf Wiedersehen. But it doesn't have to be in Vienna. It can also be in the letters. Franz Kafka. I am having a really hard time. What is this? So, like, y'all know how so is written, right? S-O. So, auf Wiedersehen. I'm going to put it somewhere. Whew. And that was the end of the fourth letter, which is short compared to everything else. And let's get into the next letter, the final letter of the day. June 25th, 1920. We are indeed beginning to misunderstand one another, Milena. You think I wanted to help you, but it was for me I was trying to help. No more about that. And as far as I know, I didn't ask you for any sleeping pills. I hardly knew Otto Gross, but I did notice that there was something essential in him, something which was at least attempting to extend a hand from admit everything. So ridiculous. The bewildered mood of his friend and relative, wife, brother-in-law, even a strangely quiet infant between the suitcase there so he wouldn't fall out of bed when left alone. who drank black coffee, ate fruit, or anything else you care to name, and somewhat reminiscent of the mood prevailing amongst Christ's disciples as they stood beneath the crucified. At the time, I was just coming from Budapest, where I had accompanied my fiancée, returning to Prague, and my hemorrhage. Gross, his wife, and brother-in-law were all taking the same night train, cussing and made noise through half of the night, shy as always. The woman was propped up in a corner, surrounded by filth. We only had sitting corridor and was sleeping, very much tended by gross, but without apparent result throughout most of the night. However, gross was telling me something, accepting small interruptions. When he was probably giving himself injections, at least it seemed that way to me, for I really couldn't understand a thing. He demonstrated his learning with a passage from the Bible. I didn't know, a fact I did not admit due to cowardice and exhaustion. He kept on endlessly dismantling the passage, endlessly adding new material, endlessly demanding my agreement. I would nod mechanically while he would practically disappear before my eyes. Incidentally, I don't think I would have understood if I had been awake either. My own thinking is cold and slow. In this way, the night passed, but there were other interruptions as well. Occasionally, he would stand and hold on to something above him and would be jolted through and through by the train to the point where he would become completely relaxed and even sleep. Later in Prague, I only saw him in passing. Wow, so his name, right, is Gross. You know how you write gross? Like Gross, that's literally his name. That's I was having like issues pronouncing with like the pronunciation because I didn't want to make it seem like, he was gross or Kafka was calling him gross, but that's literally his name. Let's keep going with the reading, shall we? Musicality is not as clearly a misfortune as you say. In the first place, it isn't for me. I inherited it from my predecessor. My paternal grandfather was a butcher in a village near Skratkonitz. I have to not eat as much meat as he butchered, and it gives me something to hold on to. Being related means a lot to me, but it is definitely a general human misfortune, similar or equal to being unable to cry or sleep. And anyway, understanding people who are musical means almost the same thing as being unmusical. Franz Kafka. Ladies and gentlemen, that was the end of the 5th letter and the end of today's video. This letter was somewhat confusing, I'm not gonna lie, but I really enjoyed them, especially the metaphor. I keep on repeating the metaphor, but I can't get it out of my head. I loved it, and I hope you guys did as well. Let me know if there's something I should add, if there's something I should remove. And as you see, the quality improved a lot, which is great. And hopefully everything pleased you. With that being said, this was Letters to Milena. I hope you have a good day and be good people. Bye.